So one of the most annoying things when trying to deal with Christian Zionists is to explain to them that there's nothing unique or special about the modern Jewish religion, and that it is essentially the same thing as the paganisms of the Near East. In fact, it's the same religion that the Canaanites had. There were, of course, multiple incarnations of this religion with different deities put at the top of that particular locality. It just so happened Yahweh, or Yahweh, was the one that was used by the ancient Israelites, or the Canaanites that became the ancient Israelites. So, Yahwism is the name given by scholars to the religion of ancient Israel and Judah. Yahwism was essentially polytheistic with a plethora of gods and goddesses. A lot of people like to claim that there's a huge difference between Atonism. Atonism is, of course, the religion of Akhenaten. I'll get into that maybe in a different video. But heading the pantheon, basically Atonism is genuine panentheism. Yahwism is just paganism. So Judaism is essentially paganism. And people would know that if they, see, for example, with me, the reason I know that is, of course, I've studied many of the many religious books, Christian, Jewish, Islamic, Hindu, etc. Hinduism doesn't have anything to do with this, though. But the thing is, when you start to look at the other religions of the Near East, the ancient Sumerian religions, ancient Babylonian religions, etc., you will see they're all the same religion, including Judaism, okay? So, heading the pantheon was Yahweh, the national god of the Israelite kingdoms of Israel and Judah, with his consort, the goddess Asherah. So remember, there are two deities, a god, Yahweh, and his consort, Asherah, okay? And second-tier gods and goddesses such as Baal, Shamash, Yarik, Mat, Astarte, each of whom had their own priests and prophets and numbered royalty among their devotees. The practices of Yahwism included festivals, sacrifices, vow-making, private rituals, and the adjudication of legal disputes. Contrary to the picture presented in the Hebrew Bible, the temple in Jerusalem was not the sole or even central temple of Yahweh, but the king was the head of the national religion and thus the viceroy on earth. Okay, of the national god, a role reflected each year when he presided over a ceremony enthroning Yahweh in the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Yahwism underwent several redevelopments and recontextualizations as the notion of divinities, aside from the comparable to Yahweh, was gradually degraded by new religious currents and ideas. And you will notice this, the modern interpretation of what we call Judaism is heavily Hellenized. Okay? That's something that needs to be taken into consideration. Okay? During the monarchic period of the Mid-Iron Age, the religion of Israel moved towards the sole worship of Yahweh alone. So during the Iron Age, okay, so only spreading to the population at large, the widespread political turbulence, yada yada, the progressive evolution towards monotheism had ultimately culminated by the end of the Babylonian exile in the late 6th century BCE, and by the 4th century BCE, Yahwism had coalesced into what is now known as Second Temple Judaism. Yahwism also gave rise to Samaritanism, okay? And I will talk about Samaritanism in a little bit, because Samaritanism is in fact, I'll talk about it now. Samaritanism is the Jewish religion, but not Jewish, practiced by the Palestinians. Okay, so when people are saying so-and-so is anti-Semitic, yada, 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 no. Samaritanism is the Abrahamic monotheistic ethnic religion of the Samaritan people, an ethno-religious group who originate from the ancient Israelites. Its central holy text is the Samaritan Pentateuch, or Torah, which Samaritans believe is the original unchanged version of the Torah. It is an ethnic religion. It is Abrahamic. Its scriptures, the Samaritan Torah. It is monotheistic, yada, yada, yada. Its region is in Palestine, Holon, Israel, yada, yada. Samaritans describe their religion as the holy faith that began with Moses, unchanged over the millennia. Okay. Principal beliefs of Samaritanism are as follows. The God is one God, and that God is Yahweh, same God recognized by the Jews. The Torah is the only true holy book and was given by God to Moses. Mount Gerizim, not Jerusalem, is the one true sanctuary chosen by God. The apocalypse, called the Day of Vengeance, will be the end of days, blah, 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 blah. Essentially, it's the same as Judaism. But what's important to know is these are the Samaritans, they're Palestinians. These are people that are not treated very nicely by the Israelis. So the center of ancient Israel's religion through most of the monarchic period was the worship of a god named Yahweh. And for this reason, the religion of Israel is often referred to as Yahwism. Yahweh, however, was not the original God of Israel. It is El, the head of the Canaanite pantheon, whose name forms the basis of the word Israel. And none of the Old Testament patriarchs, the tribes of Israel, the judges, or the earliest monarchs have the Yahwistic theophoric name. It is unclear how, where, or why Yahweh appeared in the Levant. Even his name is a point of confusion. The exact date of this occurrence is also ambiguous. The term Israel first enters historical records in the 13th century before the Common Era with the Egyptian Merneptah Stele, and while the worship of Yahweh is circumstantially attested to as early as the 12th century before the Common Era, there is no attestation of even the name Yahweh in the Levant until some 400 years later with the Misha Stele. So remember, Yahweh is the member of a number of different gods, with other gods under that god, such as Shamash and, all the Baal, whatever. So Yahweh is one of many gods. Okay? So it's just the local god of that region. Okay? That's all it is. It's a pagan religion. Okay? So Yahwism is a pagan religion, and then eventually after captivity in Babylon, it evolved, like every other religion evolves, into Judaism. So beliefs and practices in Yahwism. There is a broad consensus among modern scholars that the religion of ancient Israel was polytheistic, involving many gods and goddesses, the supreme God, Yahweh, whose name appears as an element on personal seals, alongside Yahweh, was his consort Asherah. Okay, in the temple of the 5th century Jewish settlement Elephantine in Egypt, and various biblical passages indicate that statues of the goddess were kept in Yahweh's temples. Statues of Asherah were kept in the Yahweh temples in Jerusalem, Bethel, and Samaria. Below Yahweh and Asherah were second-tier gods and goddesses such as Baal. So below Yahweh and Asherah, who were the top gods, kind of like Zeus and Hera in Greek myth. So under Yahweh and Asherah were Baal, Shamash, Yarik, Mat, Astarte, all of whom had their priests, prophets, and numbered royalty among their devotees. There's actually an excellent book that is completely fictional, but it's an excellent book that deals with these deities, and it is the Simon Necronomicon. And I would recommend people read it if you're interested in left-hand path occultism. It is mythological, like it is a fictional book, but it's also a book very popular amongst left-hand path adherents to things like, the left-hand path, or Satanism and things of that nature. So, a third tier may also have existed, made up of specialist deities such as the god of snakebite cures, etc. So, the practices of Yahwism were largely characteristic of other Semitic religions, and included festivals, sacrifices, vow-making, private rituals, adjudication of legal disputes, yada yada. Animal sacrifices played a big role in Yahwism and in Judaism, and I'm going to get into that. Even in modern Judaism, animal sacrifice still plays a big role today. So, animal sacrifices played a big role in Yahwism and in modern-day Judaism. They do still take place. So, sacrifice was presumably complemented by the singing or recital of psalms, but the details are scant. The rituals detailed in Leviticus 1-16, or 1:16, with their stress on purity and atonement, were followed only after the Babylonian exile and the Yahwism Judaism transition, meaning when Yahwism transitioned to what is now Judaism. So, places of worship, referred to as high places, were found in many towns and villages in ancient Israel as places of sacrifice from the Hebrew Bible, and from existing remains a good idea may be formed of the appearance of such a place of worship. It was often on a hill above the town, as at Ramah. There was a stele, or Matzava, the seat of the deity, and Asherah pole, named after the goddess Asherah, which marked the place as sacred and as itself an object of worship. There was a stone altar, or slaughter place, which is called a mizbah, often of considerable size and hewn out of the solid rock or built of unhewn stones, in Exodus 20:21, on which offerings were burnt. A cistern for water and perhaps low stone tables for dressing the sacrifices, sometimes also a hall for the sacrificial feasts. Ancient Israelite religion was centered on these sites, meaning it was centered around sacrifice. Okay? So keep that in mind. This is a religion of sacrifice. Okay? Probably more so than even other pagan religions of the time in Egypt and Greece and things of that nature. But it is a pagan religion. It is a polytheistic pagan religion. It is not some special super religion. Prophets and heroes. In addition to the sacrificial priests, a great role in Yahwism, and still later in Judaism, was played by prophets and epic heroes reflected in the modern Jewish texts like the legends about Samson and Joshua. There are indications that trance-related practices might have played a role in the prophetic experiences of adherents of Yahwism. According to Marty Nisinin, Yahwist prophets may have received messages from the different gods and goddesses in the Yahwist pantheon through a state of transpossession. This theory can be reconstructed from the Sumerian mythology, where the standard prophetic designations in the Akkadian language, to become crazy. So the goal is to become crazy and go into a frenzy. According to Bible scholar Simon B. Parker, trance rituals may have occurred, such as nudity, or a less extreme alternative, a trance where the person to enter the trance receives the god or spirit into their body. This is very similar to shamanic or even voodooistic practices, which I will show you later how similar this is to voodooistic practices. Like when I was a teenager, my mother made me go to some crazy Jesus freak church, and they didn't like the fact that I was a Satanist, of course. But the thing is, Satanism doesn't contain any of this craziness. At least not LaVeyan Satanism. But yet, when you bring this up to Jesus freaks, who, by the way, at that specific church would speak in tongues and babble like idiots and everything else, it goes over their head that they're acting ridiculous. Okay? That's what you need to understand. Now, that being said, in LaVeyan Satanism, a lot of LaVeyan Satanism is very similar to the teachings of Norman Vincent Peale and the power of positive thinking, things of that nature. It's not odd at all, okay? Or similar to psycho-cybernetics or things of that nature. It's not particularly odd, especially when compared to these Bronze-aged, frenziistic practices, and which do take place in modern Christian churches, okay? And that's the thing that I'm showing here. Samaritans, Israelites, Jews, modern Christians, nothing special. And that's I think the problem that you have with Christians, if you're trying to show them that Yahwism and Judaism are nothing special, is being that Christianity comes from Judaism and Yahwism, they then have to admit that Christianity is nothing special. Now, the thing is, there are important moral teachings in Yahwism, in the ancient Sumerian mythology, in Greek mythology. Hell, there's important moral lessons we can learn in Superman comics and Batman comics, but that doesn't mean that we should base our lives around Superman comics and Batman comics. Okay? Now, necromancy was a practice that was common within ancient Israel. Exorcisms were also common. They can be reconstructed from medieval Jewish texts. Exorcists, acting almost like shamans, would do rituals to exorcise one of a demon or evil spirit, according to Gina Constantopoulos, something Greek. I don't feel like sounding that out. It looks pretty easy, but screw it. Okay, so a figure named Ashipu acted as an exorcist in Mesopotamia and were trained in many fields of occultism, priesthood, and herbalism. So they were essentially witch doctors. as amulets were also used in Yahwism to ward off evil spirits. Moving forward. So the Canaanite religion was the group of ancient Semitic religions. This is what I mean, people, when they use the word anti-Semitic. This is anti-Semitic, that is anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic, anti-Semitic. They need to know what the word Semitic actually means, and they don't. The Semitic race is a subgrouping of the Caucasoid race. So Canaanite religion was polytheistic and in some cases so what I'm saying is Semite or Semitic does not specifically pertain to Jews. It also equally pertains to Palestinians. The Jewish people today are less Semitic than are the indigenous Palestinians, who are the indigenous people of that region. The Samaritans are the descendants of the Israelites, far more so than the modern Ashkenazi Jews are that are inhabiting that area. Okay? So what are the beliefs of ancient Canaan? Afterlife beliefs. Canaanites believed that following physical death, the soul departed from the body to the land of Mot or Mot. Bodies were buried with grave goods, blah, 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 cosmology. None of the inscribed tablets in the Canaanite city of yada yada, according to blah, blah, blah. Now remember, Elohim, or children of El, remember El was the chief god of the Israelites. Remember that. So keep that in mind. So El was originally, and there's this big war in the evolution of the Bible between Elohim and Yahweh over who is going to be the chief god. Okay, so the creator was known as Elion, who was the father of the divinities, and in the Greek sources, he was married to Baruch, or Beirut. This marriage of the divinity with the city would seem to have biblical parallels. Yada yada. In Canaanite mythology, there were twin mountains. Blah, 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 blah. So this is the list of deities. You will see there's an array of deities, but I want you to see one in particular, because these are all the same deities that are in Yahwism. Okay? But what's the important one here? The important one is Yahweh, or Yah. Okay? Yahweh, or Yah. The chief god of Yahwism. Okay, all these other gods and goddesses, they were all subordinate to Yahweh and his consort Asherah. Remember? That's what we learned from learning about Yahwism previously. Moving forward. Another good book, while I'm talking about it, if you want a really good book, now I don't want people thinking I support everything in this book, but I do think it is a very good breakdown of the various major religions, including like Mormonism and stuff like that. But it's called Nature's Eternal Religion by Ben Clausen. And it throws some light on this stuff. If you're, there's a lot of words in that book that people might find offensive. So if you're somebody that's easily upset by mean words, don't read the book. But otherwise, read the book, and you'll see what I'm saying. He does a really good job of going through these. Mr. Clausen was, of course, raised as a Mennonite in Ukraine, and then his family moved to Mexico, and then from Mexico to Canada, and then from Canada to the United States. People may be familiar with him. He invented the electric can opener, amongst other things. So child sacrifice was real in Canaan and the ancient Near East. So the religion of Canaan and Yahwism, child sacrifice was real, okay? When reading stories in the Bible, the modern reader often has a hard time understanding the context. Without understanding the historical context, one then may misunderstand the intention of stories and laws in the Torah. So this is from Merrimack Valley Havurah, and traditional egalitarian Torah study. So as hard as it is to believe in that time and place some cultures that sacrificed humans to their gods, sometimes even their own children. Remember, because in the Canaanite religion, if you're familiar with the Bible, they would sacrifice their firstborns. Okay? Now, in Yahwism or Judaism, there is what? Who sacrifices the first fruits? Remember, what is it? Cain and Abel, where Abel sacrifices the first, the finest of his herd, and Cain gives vegetables, and God doesn't like the vegetables, and so Cain strikes down Abel or whatnot. It's been years since I've actually read the Bible, forgive me. Do not act this way toward the Lord your God, for these people performed for their gods all manner of abominations that the Lord hates. They even burned their sons and daughters for their gods. In order to understand the context, we need to understand where and when these pagan practices were practiced and what the societies were like. Here is a map of the region historians call the ancient Near East. Yada da 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 da, Mesopotamia, Canaan, Egypt, yada da da da. Okay? There is much that is great from the ancient Near East. And that's what's important to understand. Like I said, there's a lot of important lessons that can be learned in the Bible, a lot of very interesting ways about how to establish a society, particularly in the Old Testament, a lot of ways to work to strive towards self-improvement through the teachings of Christ in the New Testament. But the thing is, there's nothing really that particularly special about these belief systems. Okay, they're not some sort of super religion. Okay, they're just religion. There's nothing special about Yahwism or Judaism or Christianity or Islam. Okay, this region roughly corresponds to the modern Middle East, Mesopotamia, modern Iraq, southeast Turkey, southwest Iran, northeastern Syria, and Kuwait, ancient Egypt, ancient Iran, Anatolia, the Levant, Arabia. Historians first refer to this region as the ancient Near East, beginning with the rise of Sumer in the 4th millennium BCE. These are the deities which are extremely similar to the Canaanite deities that are mentioned in the Simon Necronomicon, which again is a fictitious book. There is really no doubt from a historical viewpoint that child sacrifice was indeed practiced in ancient Canaan. Okay, keep that in mind when you're thinking about where Yahwism comes from and where Judaism comes from, okay? Keep that in mind as we move forward. So this goes into the excavations in ancient Carthage. The urns contain animal remains, infant remains, or a mixture of the two. I remember as a young child, I was watching a documentary about how the ancient Phoenicians would, they found soup that was made from children and sea snails, or the remains of such. Now, was it really, or maybe they were just thrown in the same pit or something like that, who knows? So, there are New Kingdom Egyptian temple reliefs showing Egyptian attacks on Canaanite cities. The inhabitants are depicted as sacrificing their children in response to the crisis. And that's what's always important to understand. A lot of people, for example, think about the ancient Aztec, the ancient Maya, and how they would sacrifice virgins and stuff like that. Things that make sense aren't necessarily true. I mean, and that's something that's very important to understand, and I'm going to point that out as we move forward, because when you embrace magical thinking and things of that nature, a lot of things can make sense when you don't weigh them against objective reality, or you're not thinking objectively. And that is a problem that has come up in civilization after civilization after civilization, whether it's in the Americas, or whether it's in the ancient Near East, or whether it's in ancient Europe. So, moving forward. So, I want to bring up Korban. Okay. So, Korban is a form of, so in Judaism, Korbanism, also spelled Korban or Korban, with a Q or with a C, is any of a variety of sacrificial offerings described and commanded in the Torah. The plural form is korbanat, or korbanoth, or korbanos. The term korban primarily refers to sacrificial offerings given from humans to God for the purpose of doing homage, winning favor, or securing a pardon. So when sacrifices were offered in ancient times, they were offered as a fulfillment of biblical commandments. Since there is no longer a temple, modern religious Jews instead pray or give tzedakah to atone for their sins, as the Korban would have accomplished in the past. Maybe not, moving forward. So, the ritual or the rite of kaparat, kaparat, is a custom in which the sins of a person are symbolically transferred to a fowl. The custom is practiced in certain Orthodox circles, so it is still practiced in certain Orthodox circles on the day before a Yom Kippur. And some congregations also on the day before Rosh Hashanah or on Hoshana Rabbah. Okay, such and such are recited. Then a rooster for a male or a hen for a female is held above the person's head and swung in a circle 3 times while the following is spoken: blah, 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 shall go, blah, blah. And they do. They're see, this is my exchange, my substitute, my atonement. This rooster or hen shall go to its death, but I shall go to good long life and peace. So they are essentially killing a chicken for the sins that they have committed. And this is modern. Remember, this is coming from Jewish Virtual Library, and this is the rite of kaparat. This goes on today. This is not something from the ancient Bronze Age or Iron Age. Okay? So what is the history of the rite? The kaparat is not mentioned in the Torah or the Talmud. The custom is first discussed by Jewish scholars in the 9th century. They explained that since the Hebrew word gever means both man and rooster, punishment of the bird can be substituted for that of a person. So as you can tell, you can reasonably, if you're crazy, make sense of these things. And that's what I'm saying. This is a problem that comes up again and again in human history. A lot of things make sense if you're not thinking rationally, okay? Or if you're over-rationalizing things. Several Jewish sages strongly opposed kaparat. Rabbi Solomon ben Abraham Adaret, one of the foremost Jewish scholars during the 13th century, considered it a heathen superstition. This opinion was shared by the Ramban and Rabbi Joseph Caro, who called it a foolish custom that Jews should avoid. They felt that it was a pagan custom that mistakenly made its way into Jewish practice, perhaps because when Jews lived among pagans, this rite seemed like a korban to some extent. However, the Kabbalists, led by mystics such as Rabbi Isaac Luria and Rabbi Isaiah Horowitz, perceived this custom's mystical significance, which strongly appealed to many people. This greatly enhanced the popularity of the kaparat ritual down to the present day. Why did some Jewish sages oppose the kaparat? Some Jewish leaders felt that people would misunderstand the significance of the ritual. The belief that the ceremony of the kaparat can transfer a person's sins to a bird, and that his or her sins would then be completely eradicated and contrary to Jewish teachings. For if the ritual could remove a person's sins, that would be the need. What would be the need for a Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement? The Mishnah Brura, an eminent contemporary commentary on Rabbi Joseph Caro's classical codification of Jewish law, explains the significance of the ritual. Judaism stresses that a person can't obtain purity from sin and thus obtain higher levels of perfection without repenting. So you have to repent. And this is what I mean. These are two different courses. Now, which one of these makes more sense? I would say that Rabbi Joseph Caro's understanding of the fact that you must repent makes a little bit more sense. What are more recent objections to the ceremony? The birds may suffer while they are handled. In some places in Israel and in the United States, chickens are sold on street corners for this ceremony, and not every merchant takes proper care of his chickens. Hence, while the Jewish tradition is filled with concepts, prayers, and actions during the Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur period that relate to the importance of Rakamim, the message of Kaparat to those who take part and those who view it may be just the opposite in some cases, a lesson of insensitivity to the feelings of other living creatures. How should Jews who are concerned about the treatment of animals respond to this issue? Jews who are concerned about the treatment of animals should try to engage courageously and respectfully with Jews who perform kaparat. It should be recognized that they are performing what they regard as an important religious. I really don't think that any consideration should be given for that, but whatever. So, some of the points that can be brought up include: 1, there is a substitute ceremony that is widely practiced in many Torah-observant Jews. Money, perhaps equal to the monetary value of the fowl, is substituted for the rooster or hen. The money is put into a handkerchief, which the person swings 3 times around his or her head, while reciting a modified saying, "This money shall go to charity, and I shall go to a good long life and to peace." Hence, the heightened sense of repentance can be kept, and perhaps even enhanced, since no bird has to lose its life or suffer for its sake. 2, we should attempt to increase the knowledge of Jews with regard to Judaism's beautiful and powerful teachings with regards to showing compassion to animals. The following are a few examples. Moshe Rabbanu and King David were considered worthy to be leaders of the Jewish people because of their compassionate treatment of animals. Rebekah was judged suitable to be a wife of the patriarch Isaac because of her kindness in watering the 10 camels of Abraham's servant. Many Torah laws involve the proper treatment of animals. One may not muzzle an ox while it is working in the field, nor yoke a strong and a weak animal together. Animals, as well as people, are allowed to rest on the Sabbath day. The importance of this concept is indicated by the fact that it is part of the 10 Commandments, and by its recitation every Sabbath morning by many Jews as part of the Kiddush ceremony. Moving forward. And I want to drive this home. This is something that does take place, the kaparat, or whatever. We went through this practices. On the afternoon before Yom Kippur, one prepares an item to be donated to the poor for consumption at the pre-Yom Kippur meal, blah, 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 using a rooster. That's a variant. Okay, you see? So you can use money, or you can use a rooster. Money or a rooster. Okay? A lot of historical controversy, animal cruelty controversy, etc. You can read this on your own. So in the Satanic Bible, this is from Sabbath School. This is Seventh-day Adventism. But, or at least I think it's Seventh-day Adventism. Seventh-day Adventist Bible Study. So in LaVeyan Satanism, part of the concept of Baphomet is not just Baphomet, not just the Eliphas Levi Baphomet, but Baphomet being the scapegoat. So Satan, on the other hand, will have to pay the debt and atone. So the goat on which the lot fell, so they sacrificed one to God, but one was given to Satan. So the lot on which the goat on which the lot fell to be the scapegoat shall be presented alive before the Lord to make an atonement with him, and to let him go for a scapegoat into the wilderness, from Leviticus 16:10. And that's also in the Satanic Bible. Moving forward. And in closing, I wanted to talk about Baphomet. Okay, so history. So the name Baphomet appeared in July 1098 in a letter from the siege of Antioch by the French crusader Anselm of Ribemont. As the next day dawned, they, the inhabitants of Antioch, called loudly upon Baphomet, and we prayed silently in our hearts to God. Then we attacked and forced them all outside the city walls. Okay, yada, 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 yada. Baphomet was allegedly worshipped as a deity by the medieval order of the Knights Templar. King Philip IV of France had many French Templars simultaneously arrested and then tortured into confessions in October on Friday the 13th on 1307. The name Baphomet appeared in trial transcripts from the Inquisition of the Knights Templar that same year. Over 100 different charges had been levied against the Templars, including heresy, homosexuality, spitting and urinating on the cross, and sodomy. Most of them were dubious, as they were the same charges that were levied against the Cathars and many of King Philip's enemies. He had earlier kidnapped Pope Boniface VIII and charged him with nearly identical offenses. Yet Malcolm Barber observes that historians find it difficult to accept that an affair of such enormity rests upon total fabrication. The Chinon parchment suggests that the Templars did indeed spit on the cross, says Sean Martin, and that these acts... Now, in the Satanic Rituals by Anton LaVey, there is a version of the Black Mass, a traditional version of the Black Mass, like this. Okay, this is the traditional version of the Black Mass where you spoof the Mass, so to say, where they were taught how to commit apostasy with the mind only and not with the heart. Similarly, Michael Haig suggests that the simulated worship of Baphomet did indeed form part of the Templar initiation rite. The name Baphomet comes up in several of these dubious confessions, yada, 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 So these are drawings of upright and inverted pentagrams representing spirit over matter. So here you see this is where you get the Satanic Baphomet, the Church of Satan Baphomet. However, the names Samael and Lilith are removed. The name Baphomet came into popular English usage in the 19th century, yada, yada, yada. Alternative etymologies, Aleister Crowley. The Baphomet of Levi was to become an important figure within the cosmology of Thelema, the mystical system established by Aleister Crowley in the early 20th century. Baphomet features in the Creed of the Gnostic Catholic Church, recited by the congregation in the Gnostic Mass. In the sentence, "And I believe in the serpent and the lion, mystery of mysteries, in his name, Baphomet." Crowley asserted that Baphomet was a divine androgyne, and the hieroglyph of arcane perfection, seen as that which reflects what occurs upon, so reflects below. What you see with Baphomet, if you look at this thing, now I've brought this up in the past. So what you see here, let me see if I can open this image.